Thank Who's that? This must be a Minnesota.
You nervous? Are you nervous? Sorry, I didn't know the mic was on. All right, can you all hear me okay? Is that all right? Test, test, test. Okay, whoever's running for Metro Council, sit down. We'll get votes after the event. Ron, that was an inside joke. Ron Wolf. All right, y'all ready? Welcome to our final event of the year, 2024, years after AD, right? Welcome to the final event of the year. We've got actually, tonight's going to be a pretty cool night because we have two different brands presenting tonight. The first one is Starlight Distillery. And everybody, raise your hand if you've not been to Huber Farms for any reason in your life. Okay. Everybody knows Huber Farms, but they also have, and they're really well known for their winemaking. They're vintners. Did I say that right? I just looked that up. No. They're great winemakers. It's a great family business that goes back 150 plus years. But they have a great distillery called Starlight, and we just did a barrel pick with them, and we partnered with the Louisville Bourbon Society, and we partnered with Bourbon Brotherhood. So the three groups, and some of you are members of all the groups, but the three groups collaborated on this, and we've got a hell of a pick that just came about 2 weeks ago. So Brady's getting anxious. No, don't pull a hamstring to get up here. Hold on. But I asked Brady, because of the timing of the release and this being the last event of the year, if he would go ahead and come over, and he said he'd be happy to, so we're excited about that. Next year, we have 5 events already scheduled, and I'll let you all go to the website. Hello, Amy. By the way, have you all been to Whiskey Thief downtown in Nulu? Raise your hand if you have not. Raise your hand if you would like to go check it out. Raise your hand if you want to meet the managing director of it, Amy Fox. Amy, raise your hand. All right. Amy was a Big Bourbon Club member long before Whiskey Thief came into her life, so we're sharing her with them, but we're proud of you, so congratulations. But anyway, we've got great events already scheduled for next year. We did a barrel pick at Limestone, the Beams, Limestone Branch Distillery, probably 2 months ago, and again, we did that with the collaboration of Louisville Bourbon Society and the Bourbon Brotherhood, and we don't know when that comes out, but I would guess in a month or 2 or 3, we don't know. But it's going to be another Yellowstone pick, and as you know, they've all been fantastic, and we're excited about that. Okay? Any questions? Who all traveled from out of town to come tonight? Travis, welcome. I didn't even know you were here. So we got Nashville, we got Terre Haute, right? I was just testing you. They're from Fort Wayne. The Shoemakers, they come down all the time, but thanks for coming in on a cold, nasty night, and thanks everybody else for coming out. So with no further ado, I'm excited first to introduce Brady Cochran over at Starlight Distillery. Brady, tell us about what we're doing here.
All right. Thank you. Well, first off, thank you all so much for your all's wonderful club. You guys, ever since you guys have come into my life with Steve and all that, been nothing but welcoming, and just getting to know some of you all and learning about how you guys kind of approach your passions for bourbon has really kind of always helped reignite a lot of my passions as well. And just meeting great people just tonight, like Paul and Jonathan over there, and people in the past. Thank you all so much for having us. So I'm here to introduce the barrel that the Trinity came in and picked. And I'll kind of keep it brief because I know we all want to get to this wonderful rum that I just tried for you all to kind of present tonight. So the Bourbon Trinity came in a few months ago and went through our bourbon barrel picking experience. And the way that we really like to do things is we just kind of like to play matchmaker. So Andrew Jordanic, our spirits program director, is kind of the love doctor between people wanting bourbon and barrels of bourbon. And he's just there to really kind of hone you in on what's kind of speaking to you as far as the whiskeys that you're trying. And usually, I mean, we'll let you try up to 20 barrels and go back and retry them. But we definitely want you to find the barrel that's working best for you. And it's all straight out in the rick house, thieving it as we go. So it's a really fun, interesting experience. If I'll be here the whole night. If anybody's ever interested in coming out and visiting the farm, taking a tour of the distillery, and going to see some of the whiskeys out in the warehouse, feel free to come get my card. And I'd love to host you out there sometime because you all have always been so great to me, even before Starlight and all that. So thank you all very much. So the barrel that we picked when they went out there is a French double oak. Now, the cool story that really kind of starts with this is a lot of the secondary aging that we do in a secondary finished barrel. The barrels are either reused from a rum or we do some where we reuse fill honey. These were brand new, freshly and toasted French oaks from a central region in France. So we got wood from 5 different regions. It was Limousin, Central Forest, Nevers, a couple others that I never can remember or really even pronounce. But essentially, they went around and the cooperage helped them select different logs and trees to kind of pull in to sample for them to actually build barrels for us and send them over. Now, the really cool part of these barrels is when they were dragging in the logs, over there, they were actually splitting the entire or actually saw cutting. So typically over here in cooperages in Kentucky and the States, they'll saw cut the log to length and then fashion the staves from there. They were kind of doing it in reverse. And that was kind of, I think it was Christian that kind of noticed them doing it backwards. And Ted actually went over there and asked them why they were doing it in reverse. And they were like, well, it's just easier to show you. So they brought them over and they actually split some of the logs open. When they actually flayed the wood open for them to see, there was all hunks of metal, bullets, and stuff like that in the actual wood. So in this region of France was a very hot spot for World War I and World War II, and specifically in World War II, the Battle of the Bulge. So whenever these trees were a lot smaller and younger, a lot of the shrapnel, bullets, and everything involved in the war would get embedded into the exterior of the tree. That tree, if it didn't die, would grow around that shrapnel. So when they split the trees open, they could actually count the rings on the tree all the way back to the 1940s. And then there was another gap to the 1910s. So there was shrapnel from World War I, World War II, and specifically the Battle of the Bulge. And so they had to split those trees open, remove the shrapnel, and then they can saw cut to length to make the barrels out of. And then once they actually fashion the staves and put the barrel together, we had them do an elongated toast. So typical toasting processes can take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. This was a very nice, long 45-minute toast with an infrared laser. So they would shine this in and get the temperature dialed in. And if it ever started to get a little too hot, they would raise the barrel up. And if it started to get a little too cool, they would lower the barrel back over. And the embers that they used actually were from the trees that they were harvesting for the barrel. So it was a very authentic, all-natural toasting process. Now, what you kind of get in this whiskey, at least what I get, and what I really love about our French Double Oak Toasted program is you get these kind of nice little marshmallow notes, but a very nice, deep richness and full flavored whiskey. So that is the French Double Oak that the Bourbon Trinity came and picked. If you guys have any questions for the rest of the night, I'm going to turn it back over to Brander? Oh, to Steve. But if throughout the night, if anybody has any questions or would like my card to come out and visit, please stop by. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Brady. Thank you. So I met Brady when he was at Michter's, and he is the one who set up the Michter's. Raise your hand if you came to the Michter's event. So it was Brady a year ago that originally helped me get that set up. And then ultimately he moved back home. He's from the Knobs, and he went back home with family and friends that work over there. So they're doing a great job. And Andrew Jordanic puts on as good of a tasting experience that I've ever been on, and I've been to a lot of them. Absolutely. It's fantastic over there. The Battle of the Bulge, Crest probably knows this, and so do the Callahans. December 16th, 1945, I believe it was 45 or 44. We did this last night, we practiced. 44 through January of 45, 19,000 American soldiers died. The single costliest battle of World War II was in the Ardennes region of the Battle of the Bulge, which was the Germans' last offensive before we kicked their ass and they ultimately surrendered. So anyway, it's fascinating with the history of these trees. I've said this to many people since I've had it. Brady has not heard me say it. This is the best $60 bottle of bourbon I think that I've ever remember having. And in fact, the $61 we're charging is about 5 or 6 below MSRP that you're going to find anything similar in a liquor store of a double oak Starlight. So if you have, raise your hand if you have a credit card here tonight. Well, that's not a funny question. Go see Stephen Pope, get your bottle. It's brand new. We call ourselves the Trinity. That was just the name that we came up with there because of the 3 groups. So now let me introduce Dan Dehart. So I met Dan, I don't know when, a couple years ago. Dan was a classmate of a great friend of mine, Doug Wise, who's a top shelf member here. And Doug saw you after many years of not seeing you at a summer reunion or something. He goes, Steve, do you ever drink rum? I said, yeah. I said, I had Captain Morgan and Coke in college and puked all night and I've ever had it since. He goes, no, there's like really good rum. I'm like, I wouldn't know that. And he said, well, Dan has got his own brand. And I said, I got to know more. And to make a long story short, Dan comes to the house a month later. We sip on his rum. I'm like, oh my God. I had no idea because I've never literally had it since college. And we sip it like bourbon. And it's like crazy good. And he starts telling me the stories. And he's going to tell you in more detail than I am, but these are single barrels. These are aged. These are high proof. They remind me a lot of bourbon. But what he created, this category that he created, is where they take this rum, this single barrel aged high proof rum, and they finish it in one-time used bourbon barrels. Because remember, rum is aged in bourbon barrels, but it could have been 15 times over. So it's not really drawing anything from those barrels. But when he puts it into a one-time used barrel that he buys here, exports into Panama, imports into Panama, exports from here, it gets a lot of bourbon characteristics in it. And so I had it with Dan. I fell in love with it immediately. And then I went last March, I went to Panama. And I met Dan there. And so we hung out in Panama, not Panama City where you all went to spring break, but Panama, the country. And I won't go into the details, but we had a great time. And if you've never been there, you should go to Panama. But incredible rum from there. Dan's become a great friend. He's got an incredible brand that he started on his own. He's a Louisville guy. And he moved to Orlando 15 or so years ago with his family, so he hadn't been here a long time. But he's one of us. He's got a hell of a brand that he's done all on his own, created a whole category within this whole space called rum. And he's doing great and needs to do better, and we want to support that. And that's the reason I did the barrel pick. So with no further ado, Dan Dehart.
All right, is that good? Yeah, all right, perfect. All right, well, thank you, Steve, for the introduction. And what he didn't tell you is when I went over to his house that night and brought some rum, he didn't invite me in the house. I had to sit outside in the porch. And he's like, Dan, I'll be honest with you, I haven't had this since college. And he goes, I'm not really too sure about this. So I think he had to take a little test first before it was going to go any further, if he was going to invite me to his house. But he quickly did, and opened his arms up, and we had a good time. And so I appreciate being here tonight, and glad y'all all came out. I don't know how many of you actually drink rum as opposed to just bourbon. Okay, a couple of hands, but I'm guessing most of you did not think you were going to be drinking rum on a cold wintry night. And so I certainly hope it's going to warm you up and you're going to appreciate what it is you're going to try tonight. So a little bit about myself, as Steve had mentioned, I grew up here, went to school here. In fact, my brother's joining me tonight. He still lives here. So Mike, my brother, he's older than me, but I say I'm the better looking and the smarter one. So he got the short end of the stick. But I think for I love rum, but my first and foremost love, it happens to be bourbon and rye whiskey, which I still love today. And I think like many people, particularly in America, I think most people think of rum as limited to just Bacardi or Captain Morgan, and it's something to be mixed. So whether it's rum and Coke, pina coladas, mojitos, whatever the case may be. And I think that's usually the extent of people's knowledge or perception of rum. And that was mine as well. And so that was an equal footing that I had. But some years ago, I was handed a glass of neat rum. It was aged. And I tried it. I was somewhat skeptical, just like Steve was. And I tried it, and I was blown away with the taste, the aroma, everything it had to offer. And so that opened the door for myself to realize that there's a whole nother world to rum out there that I had no clue about. And so tonight you're just going to get a little sliver of the rum world. And talking about rum, so as you know with bourbon has to be made in the U.S. and it's got to be, 51% corn? Okay, so rum can be made anywhere in the world. And it has to be from 100% from sugarcane. So that's our so-and-so grain. We know it's not a grain, but sugarcane has to be the basis of all rum that is bottled. Otherwise, it legally should not be called rum. Now, that's really rum, that's where it ends. Otherwise, it becomes diverse. And so you have rums that are made from the juice of the cane. You have rums made from molasses, which is a byproduct of making sugar from the sugar cane as well. And then, of course, you have different distillation techniques. You have rum that is sold unaged off the still or aged. You have rums that may have coloring added to it, like Scotch. Scotch, you can add coloring to it. You're allowed to. You can have rums that have sugar added to it. So if you ever tasted a rum that was super sweet, chances are it had sugar or some type of sweetener added back into it. And so rum becomes incredibly diverse in terms of tasting. So it's a bit of a challenging category to navigate, because if you taste a rum, like a spice rum, and you may not like it, don't associate that all rum is like that, or a sweet rum. It's incredibly diverse. And again, that's why I say you're going to get just really one touch of the entire rum category. But I found when I did my taste of the aha moment, that opened up the door for me. And I started going in and exploring, understanding, learning about rum. And eventually that's what led me to create Grander Rum. And so,
Hey, Dan, let me
Yeah.
interrupt a second. Hey, don't taste yet. And before you do, if you've had bourbon or beer or anything else, cleanse your palate with water. Cleanse it as much as you can before we get going into the rum.
Okay,
It'll help you to appreciate
now,
it more.
are they allowed to taste after that?
I don't know yet. We'll let them know then. Yeah, we got 3 past dues here, so they can for sure.
And by the way, what is being poured right now should be our 8-year-old. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit and explain what that is, besides being 8 years old. So Grander. So when I decided to launch a brand of rum, I actually came back up here to Kentucky to do the Moonshine University. Has anybody heard of that? Okay. And so I did that because at that point I was thinking about, do I want to do my own micro distillery, or do I want to find a distillery that I could work with and launch a brand? And so after a week, and as much as I would love to have my own craft distillery, I realized that the amount of capital, the amount of knowledge that, I mean, I felt like I was smart enough to figure out how to distill, but was it going to be any good or not? Who knows? So at that point, thank you, sir. At that point, I decided I was going to launch a brand, and I wanted to find a distillery that I could work with, which is not an easy venture, particularly when I was going to go outside the U.S. And so I wanted to find a distillery, and there was a couple of things that were important to me. First of all, I did not want to add anything to the rum. No sugaring, no coloring, no flavors. And the reason for that is because my love for bourbon. Bourbon, you can't do that. And that's what resonated with me. And that's what I wanted to do with the rum. And so I needed to find a distillery that was really crafting something that I thought was quality and that would work with what I wanted to do. And then secondly, I wanted to find a distillery that would allow me to collaborate and to innovate. And so I ended up parking myself at this distillery because I do a lot of stuff there. And not many distilleries are going to open up their doors to allow you to play around and do things that take away from their production. And so going through and talking to a number of distilleries around the Caribbean, I ended up down in Panama and met with the master blender, met with the owners, and I loved the story. I loved what they were doing, and I loved what Panama offered for the rum. Now, Panama happens to be, as you may or may not know, it sits basically as the bridge between South and North America. And so you have on one side Colombia, and then you have Costa Rica on the other side. So as you would expect, it is a very hot tropical climate, which is fantastic for growing sugarcane. And so all the sugarcane that we use for our molasses is grown at the distillery. And so that makes it really nice. We don't have to source our raw ingredients. We have it growing right there, and it's being processed right in that particular region as well in terms of creating that molasses. So once that's done, we go straight into distillation as well. And everything is column distilled down in Panama for this rum. And after that, if it's not going to be sold unaged, then it's going to go into barrels. And as Steve mentioned, everything is aged in ex-bourbon barrels. And that's a pretty common thing to age in for rum. So that's not unusual. It's a very common thing, just like Scotch. So it's easy to buy those barrels, and those barrels, the used barrels, used to be cheaper than new barrels. I don't know if they still are, but the barrel market has been insane. They're approaching the same prices. But anyhow, so we age in ex-bourbon barrels. And so this 8-year-old that you're going to taste, if you haven't, and I think Steve might say it's okay to taste now, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, it's okay.
I just want you to put your power. It'll help you. Well, you're welcome, family.
So this is aged in ex-bourbon barrels, but the barrels have been used already 2 to 3 times by the distillery. So in rum, you can reuse those barrels as many times as you wish. There is no cap. So it's really up to the master blender to say, we're done with it. We're not going to get anything else from that barrel. But this rum is aged, again, and the barrels have been used 2 to 3 times. So might be hard to see, but this is the color of the rum. So if you can imagine, in bourbon, an 8-year-old bourbon is going to be quite dark, but not in this rum. And again, it's because every time you use those barrels, you're extracting what that barrel has to offer in terms of color and flavor. So That's the natural color after 8 years in those barrels.
How many barrels was that in?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
How many barrels was it in over the 8 years?
Okay, that's a great question. How many barrels was it in over the 8 years? So, what is common in the rum world, particularly in the Caribbean, and due to the climate, that it's actually somewhat common to do a consolidation to the life of aging. So typically what that means is, let's say after 4 years, they'll pull down all the barrels that are the same age. We're not mixing, we're not doing Solera, and we'll consolidate. So to simplify, we may take 10 barrels and then dump them and actually consolidate them down to maybe 7 barrels. Okay, so the reason for that is there's strong belief and evidence that it helps counteract the evaporation and the loss. And so that's the reason for that. So in the first year, typically out of the gate, we're going to lose 10 to 12%. And then after the second year, it's going to go down to roughly 8%. And then the third year, 4 to 6%, and then it may end up around 2 to 4%. It just depends. So this particular one, I would say probably 2 after after one time after the consolidation process. Yes.
What's the first point on this?
On what you're drinking, on what you're drinking, it's 90 proof, 45%. Yeah, and so now, so rum, I get a lot of people who on my website or whatever, they'll ask me, hey, I'm going to Panama. Where can I buy this in Panama? Or I live in Panama. Where can I buy it in Panama? And the answer is you can't, because I actually don't sell it in Panama. Why is that? Well, traditionally, people, particularly in Central and South America, want not this. They want a rum that's typically no more than 80 proof. So it's going to be much lower in proof, but they also want a rum that is usually sweeter as well. And I do not add any sugar to this. So this is not a rum that you typically are going to find people drinking or sipping in Central America. I'm starting to see more people interested in it, but it hasn't been enough to make a move yet. So yeah, good questions, and please keep them coming.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
I got a question from Facebook. So who is the distillery? And I can tell you this because I was there. I don't remember their name, but I would call it like the MGP in Panama for rums, because they make for.
Yep.
They were making rum for when we got there. They were bottling for Bruno Mars. He's got a rum. They're making it for Russia.
Yeah.
They're making it in Africa. Brands around the world, right?
So yeah, so the actual distillery is Las Cabras Distillery, which is in the Herrera province of Panama, and that's where all of this is created and produced. And Steve is right. They do produce for other brands as well, and so you can end up tasting. Well, for an example, the Bruno Mars one, they make I think a coconut rum and a chocolate rum. So very, very different from what I'm doing. A whole different thing. And then actually, I'm starting to work with a second distillery in Panama as well. But that's for another conversation. So, but this rum is I call it 100% Panamanian. And what I mean by that, it is distilled first and foremost with Panamanian sugarcane, and we do all of our aging down in Panama, and we bottle in Panama. So I'm not bringing anything back and doing anything with the rum until it is bottled and sealed. And so for me, this allows you to get a really good representation of what an authentic, natural Panamanian rum is, and at a higher proof than you would traditionally see coming out of Panama as well.
So let me ask you all a question. How many of you all have ever had rum to the level that you would say you know a little bit about it? Raise it high. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So not very many people in here. So that's probably 10% at most. Is that representative of what you would typically see of a bourbon group?
Yep. Maybe a little bit more now. Maybe it was like 6% or 5, but it's slowly gaining more interest.
So of the 10 of you roughly that said yes, you've had rum to the point that you know a little bit about it, how many of you all like rum?
Okay.
So how do the people that have never had it like it? I don't know how that works. Chris.
So Steve, this is my wonderful product. It's great. Bourbon is a sipping drink. I love to put ice in it and sip it. Whereas rum is more of a mixing drink, not drank, exclusively on its own. To me, this would be great mixed with whatever, mojito or pina colada, whatever else. But singularly, it's different. It's different than bourbon, where we're sipping bourbon exclusively for the bourbon cake.
Right. Well, and so there's a lot of people out there that actually seek out rums in the same manner as you drink your bourbon, that just want to sip it.
Really?
Yep. Exactly. They just want to enjoy the essence of rum. I would argue rum is probably, if not, the most diverse spirit out there. If you ever go to a real rum bar and sit down, and if they have a really good rum collection, and say, I just want to sip rum. I want to try rums that I can sip and enjoy. And they'll bring down rums that will fit that profile, but they're going to be incredibly different depending on how they were distilled. Was it from the juice of the cane? Was it from molasses? And then how it was aged and distilled. And yes, and so there is a growing, I would say the growing side of rum is what you just described for bourbon. And that's people who just want to sip it. They're not mixing it. There's a whole other road out there. And I would like to believe that one of these rums that you're going to try, you're going to be like, I can see myself sipping this.
To me, the lighter colored one, singularly, as to me, is not to my taste. But the other the red that we chose, that's absolutely delicious. Singular.
Yeah.
That's what kind of rum it's like.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think the 8-year-old is going to be the one that is far more versatile. People are going to be more willing to create a cocktail out of this.
Now remember,
enjoy that.
only one of these 4 was finished in a bourbon barrel, and that's our pick. So that's probably why you like it. And the third one is finished in a port barrel, which we haven't gotten to yet. So these are just like bourbon, very different variations.
Yeah.
Joe's older than dirt, right there.
That's a hell of a question. I don't even know. Yeah. Come down to Florida. I'll show you one. Well, I tell you what, I will say, if you like old fashions, even this 8-year-old makes a killer old fashioned. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. But it also makes a really good daiquiri.
So is there such thing as a rum bar in Louisville? Probably not, is there?
I think there might be. There's got to be.
So there are rum bars in Orlando, I bet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Steve Pope. Question in the back.
Hey, Steve, good to meet you. Finally. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, certainly with my rum, I think they drink lower than what they are in terms of the proof. And so are all rums like that? No, they're not. But I think these, so when you get the old description for rums, you had Spanish style, you have English style, you have a French agricole style. They're all very different in tasting. I mean, some people may absolutely, and a lot of people, like the agricole is made from the cane and the juice, so it's very earthy. You're really going to taste the grass of that cane, which could be a big turnoff for a lot of people, because it's just too, a lot of herbal and earthy. And then you get Jamaican rums that can be really funky, and they have this overpowering funk sense that, again, some people would be really turned off on. But this is a Spanish style rum, which is typically going to be, it's produced in a way that is more mellow than like the other ones I talked about. And that's because it's a molasses-based, column distilled. And so they're typically in Panama, when they create two types of distillate, heavy and light. Heavy meaning it's usually a one column pass, and it has all the flavor. It's packed full of the congeners and the esters, and it's got a lot of flavor. Whereas the light, it's been distilled multiple times, and it's not quite a neutral spirit, but then it's starting to become more like that. It's losing its flavor, and then they'll blend the two together. And so this is very common of a Spanish style rum. They'll blend the two together, and then that's what's formed for aging. And so I think because of the way it's made, I tend to think that it does drink. It feels lower in proof than what it is, and a bit smoother than maybe what it is. Yes.
So your molasses, you're making it out of molasses.
Yes, molasses.
What is the cook time? Does that vary on, you go to the store, you get light, dark?
So I'm not an expert in molasses, but it's a grade 8. It's going to be their top grade molasses that still has a lot of the sugar nutrients in it. And that's what's going to be used, because there are different grades of molasses. And if you want to go down that rabbit hole, I'm not going to be able to meet you there. But it is for them, because it is their own cane. It's going to be the top grade molasses that is used for this rum and for the rum that they're producing. And in the distilleries, most of them used to have their own mill, or so to speak, at the distillery, where they would just process the cane, cook it, and then create the molasses themselves and sell off the sugar. But just like here in the U.S., when you have farms, you have different mills and so forth. And so now, typically, the distilleries will use a local mill. So the cane will be harvested from their land, but then it's sent to the local mill to where it's going to be actually created in terms of the molasses. So, was there another question?
All right, why don't we do this, Mr. Shoemaker? 1 second. Let's go ahead and transition to the second pour. And you're going to be the first question, if you would talk about the second pour and what this grander is.
I think I did see her. Right. Well, the second pour happens to be, it's called Trophy Release. It's a grander Trophy Release. So the Trophy Release is a fun bottling for me. Each bottling is going to be unique, one-off, different from the last. And it's all dependent upon the barrels I select personally. So I'm actually doing the blend for this particular rum. So I am going through the warehouse down in Panama, and I'm picking out rums that are at least 8 years in age and up to 15. And then I will pick out a couple of barrels that I'll blend together based on just, interesting barrel characteristics. And we'll bottle it. Typically, we're going to bottle this at 100 proof. And I'm trying to create a more flavorful expression of the rum, again, based on the barrels that I have selected. So this particular release is a combination, I believe, of 8 10-year-old and 14-year-old rums that I have selected. And the 8-year-old is going to be aged in our typical ex-bourbon cask. And just like bourbon, each barrel is unique. So each barrel is, even though it's been used, it still is going to create its own fingerprint that's going to be unique and different from the next barrel over. And then the other barrels I picked, the 10 and 14-year-old, are actually finishes that I did. And so it's kind of it's a collection of different barrels I picked. And again, each release for the trophy release is different. It's unique from the last one. So that's a trophy release. Now you had a question for me.
A number of years ago, I was introduced to Mount Gay rum.
Yep.
What's the controversy?
They produced, I guess, varieties of.
What are you talking about?
Exactly this region, like.
Oh, I had no idea.
Is that a higher step up in the rum?
Yeah. So Mount Gay is from Barbados. And it's going to be also a molasses base. I believe, I think they may do a combination of pot still and column still as well. But yeah, they have some entry level products, but then they have some more exclusive bottlings as well. They can get very expensive very quickly. And so, and I think there's some, these are two different products, but in the world of rum and how expansive it is and how diverse it is, I think there's some more similarities between this and Mount Gay than differences, if that makes sense. Yes. Thank you. And so how did you describe it? The mouthfeel? Okay, yeah. So I think it's a great question. I think, for this product, it's a function. I'd like to say it's a function of that molasses molasses is a funny thing because molasses is the most common used ingredient for rum because it can be transported. And it, I don't know what the shelf life is, but it can last a long time. So many distilleries in the U.S. are going to use molasses, and around the Caribbean where they can't grow their own cane. So it's easily transported. But I do believe, at least in my opinion, the fact that this molasses is fresh, if there is such a thing, it does play a role because we're distilling right when that is harvested. So it's literally harvested, processed, and then we're talking just a matter of days when that molasses is turned around, and then we're going to fermentation. And so I've got to believe that has an influence on whether that molasses sat for however long. But I think it's also a tribute of just the distillation process. You know better than most. There's bad distillation out there that will play a role in it. And I believe our master blender for this rum, he's an 86-year-old man, and he's Cuban born. So he actually worked in the Cuban rum industry, and he worked there for many years, and he actually left once Cuba sold the distribution rights of Havana Club to Pernod Ricard. Pernod Ricard came in and said, okay, we're going to sell the heck out of Havana Club, the Cuban Havana Club, but they needed to increase the production probably tenfold, if not even higher. And so, but they wanted to do it in a certain way. And so they were going to make many modifications to the process, in which he completely disagreed with. So he left and went to Panama. And then he actually became the master blender of a rum brand called Ron Abuelo, which actually is the largest rum producer out of Panama. And then he did that for a number of years until he started his own distillery. So he employs his Cuban methods that he learned into what he produces. And so I really believe that experience and that knowledge plays a role into really that final product as well.
Okay. What is his name? The old guy. Do you remember?
I do.
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Oh, you're asking me? Okay.
Yeah.
What do you want his real name or his nickname?
I met him with you. What's his
Yeah,
name?
you did. Well, his nickname is Don Pancho.
What is it?
Don Pancho.
Don Pancho.
Yes.
So we were at the foreign trade zone, not the distillery out in the jungle.
Yep.
And he's known Don Pancho for years. Don Pancho is like, I don't know if it's as strong as Pappy Van Winkle, but he is one of the top godfathers of rum in the world. And he comes up, and he's got to be 85 or older.
Yeah, 86.
And he sees Dan, and he hugs him like it's his grandson. And he pulls Dan into this little private office. And I'm now thinking, have you ever seen the Corleone family and The Godfather? There's 4 old men, and there's shit going on, and I don't want to know what it is. And he's got a barrel in the corner of his office. How big is that barrel? 200 gallon?
Yeah.
It's a barrel of rum in his office. It's huge. And he tells us to sit down, and we share some of the rum, and he tells a couple of stories in Spanish, and we act like we knew what he was saying, and it was incredible. We're walking out, and he's got a trophy case. And on the trophy case, he has these fancy bottles. And I looked at one, I said, hey, Don Pancho, can we have some of that? And he's like, shut up, don't talk to Don Pancho. And he goes, yeah, and he sits us back down. It's a 35-year-old, like $1,000, $2,000 bottle of rum, and he makes us sit down and drink it with him.
Yep.
How cool was that?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind
Was
of
that
man he
awesome?
is. That is. That was really neat. So,
Dan's like, no,
Yeah.
Mr. Don Pancho, don't talk to him that way.
and he left.
He
And
loved it.
And he came back with some glasses,
He did.
poured for us, and it was a beautiful rum.
Oh my
It
God.
was absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
So, quick story about Don Pancho, and I have you ask a question. So, Don Pancho speaks as much English as I speak Spanish, which is none. And but there's another guy I work with that's bilingual, and so every time I go down there and we meet, I always have the other guy with me as well. And then one time I had to make a trip down to Panama. The guy Carlos, he's like, Dan, I'm going to be in Europe. I'm not going to be there. And I said, don't worry. I go, Don Pancho and I will be. I go, I have this thing on my phone. It's called Google Translate. I go, we're going to be just fine. So I go see Don Pancho. We sit in his office for 1 hour, and we have a meeting. And I'm translating, talking to him, and I walk away going, great meeting. I mean, it was just easy peasy. Google Translate is the best thing. Fast forward 3 months later, I go back down, and we go back to Don Pancho's office, and Carlos is there. We're getting ready to start a meeting. Don Pancho says something in Spanish, and Carlos goes, oh, Dan, Don Pancho wants me to tell you that your Google Translate sucks. He had no clue what I said the entire 1 hour. He just nodded, and I thought we were golden. So,
Okay. All right. So in a sound bite, tell them the difference between the first rum we had and the second rum, and then when we get your all's opinion of it.
So the first rum, I mean, well, first of all, the first rum will give you really an essence of what this aged rum out of Panama, unadulterated, is. And I think you are going to pick up some of the really light touches coming in from that oak barrel. You're going to start to see and begin to see it, but again, very light touch. You might get a little bit of bacon spice on it, a little bit of oak, a little bit of tannins coming in, but a very light representation of it.
And Dan, am I not right? Most rums are aged 3 years or less.
I mean,
A lot of them?
I think the most rums that are sold are 3 years or less.
So this
for
is an
sure.
8-year-old rum.
Yeah.
So it's aged, right? All right. So what about number 2?
So number 2 is it's a blend of barrels I'm picking out between 8 and 15 years. So again, 8 being the minimum, up to 15 years of age. And as I described earlier, each release of the trophy is unique. It's a one-off blending, and it's going to be dependent on the barrels that I select personally to blend together. So, but the whole idea behind this is to bring out some of the more bolder flavors of the rum that we have sitting in our warehouse, but blending it together. And again, I'm picking out a lot of different barrels. I'm trying to blend together a rum that has a very unique stamp on it, but also, it works together in a very good totality from the mouthfeel. And so you're gonna pick up much more influence from the barrel. It's gonna be a heartier rum to enjoy.
So what do y'all think of the difference between 1 and 2? Steve, real quick, and then we'll go that.
So the second one, you can buy it on my website if you can't find it in a store. So the second one, SRP, suggested retail price is $49.99.
It's far more complex than your wine.
Yes. Yeah. 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 No, thank you. Yeah, it's as mentioned, number 2 is going to be much more complex. The rums are going to be complex that I'm selecting, and then the mouthfeel is going to be much more. You're going to feel it, you're going to enjoy it, and again, I bottle it at 100 proof. Again, most rums that you're going to find on the shelf are going to be typically 80 proof. So yes. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Hold on, everybody, quiet down. Quiet down.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So the trophy release. I mean, typically it's less than 15 barrels. It's small that I'm picking out, and you're right. I'm just picking out ones. Typically for the trophy release, what I do is I'll find one barrel that really hits me. And I'm like, wow, this is really incredible. So at that point, I'm going to build a release centered around that one barrel. And so I'm going to try to find rums that will complement it or even elevate it. And it's given me a great respect for blending because it's not easy. It's very easy to find another rum that actually takes away from it and takes it on a negative direction, so to speak. So,
all right, so that's all right. So let's do this. Let's start on number 3. Cleanse your palate again. Jonathan, go ahead, and we'll keep going as we sip on 3.
Yep.
So as a guy, I'll be honest, I was coming here with low hope because every time I've had either rum or I've had rum finished bourbon, I have never enjoyed it.
Yep.
How can I enjoy your rum that's finished bourbon barrel so much if I don't like bourbon that's finished rum barrel?
Well, we appreciate you driving 4 hours with low expectations. We want to send your ass home with a lot of bottles.
It's like no, that's great. It's like the blind dates I used to go on. Girls would show up, I had low expectations. So, yeah. That's a heck of a question.
All right, everybody hold down back there. It's getting loud, please.
It's getting rowdy. That's a great question. So how, why you're talking about bourbons finished in rum, barrels that you don't really enjoy. And yeah. Well, I think one thing, I think for me, particularly with bourbon drinkers, my rum, and I like bourbon, right? So when I blend these and make a product, I'm first and foremost, I'm wanting something that I'm going to enjoy as well. And so, maybe because I have that taste for bourbon, it helps me aim and finish and select barrels that really appeal to my palate. So maybe our palates are, not all that different as well. But but also, rum is incredibly diverse. So even though a rum can be aged in an ex-bourbon barrel, doesn't mean it's going to be something you're going to like. So there's rum agricoles, which are French Caribbean rums that are distilled from the cane of the juice. And if you try that, and it may be a rum that's aged 12 years in an ex-bourbon barrel, and you're certainly going to pick up those ex-bourbon barrel notes, but first and foremost, you're going to pick up that cane juice that you may go, nah, this is not for me. I don't like it. It's a very distinct taste. Well, I mean, and it's all subjective, right? So some people love agricole rums.
Hey, Dan, the answer is hell yes, a lot better.
Well, yeah. Well,
Hell yes. Thank you for asking.
yep, exactly. So I need to get Steve up here to continue talking for me. But yeah, I think, and it's, the rum really lends itself as well to the barrels. So I buy, so as Steve had mentioned earlier, I buy the barrels that we finish in myself. So often I go down in downtown Kentucky or Louisville. They have Independent Stave has a warehouse. So they're buying back a lot of barrels from different distilleries that they provide barrels to in cooperage form, and other ones that don't. But if you walk in there, it's like for me going into a candy store, there's barrels from everywhere in there. And not just Kentucky. I mean, they got barrels from different parts of the U.S. and even Europe. And so I'm buying barrels and I'm shipping them down to Panama. And I really haven't had a barrel that I walk away going, it just doesn't work. And so I think the rum really lends itself really well to picking up all these notes and playing around.
You notice the difference from a higher type of bourbon to a lower type of bourbon?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've experimented with a lot of different bourbon barrels, and some I don't think they're still good. Others surprise me. I'm like, wow. I mean, I'll be honest. There's how many of y'all like Blanton's? Okay, not as many people, but I bought some Blanton's barrels, and I'll be honest. I bought it because I knew retailers would love it. Anything finished in a Blanton's barrel, oh, yeah. And so my expectations really weren't, and I enjoy Blanton's, but is it a bourbon I'm going to go out and pay a lot of money for or seek? Probably not. But the rum in that barrel was, wow, I couldn't believe how good it turned out. It turned out far better than I ever imagined.
All right, so let's do this. I've got Ed in the back with a question. I've got a question from Scott Ridenauer on Facebook. Miss Beam. Okay, so let's do this. Explain what number 3 is first, and then we're going to do the quick questions on that we just pointed out.
Yep. So number 3 is a rum, my rum finished in a port cask, Portuguese port, and so it's you're going to pick up as you taste it. It's going to be a little sweeter. And that sweetness is coming from that sweet fortified wine called port.
How long did it age in the port cask?
This one, I'll tell you, it's a good question. 11 months. So
how big is the port cask?
225 liters.
It's a big one.
So bigger.
Yeah.
A bourbon cask is 200 liters. So
it's not much bigger than
it's
a
not much.
53 gallon.
A little bit bigger. Just finished. So this is actually, it's a 10-year-old rum, finished 11 months in the port. Now in Panama, as I mentioned earlier, it's a very tropical climate. Humidity, hot, year round. And so if you can imagine, the barrel it opens up. It's not contracting.
Nothing's closed.
The barrel is open. It's breathing.
It's so good.
And so when you add the rum to it,
It's the only
immediately
finished rum.
it's soaking into that wood. It's interacting with that wood. And then whatever happens to be locked up in that barrel, which in this case,
Did you get 3
port. I mean, port is still
Why didn't
still
you get
locked up in
6?
that wood. Even though the barrel itself is empty, you still have some of that
all back
port
there for sale.
just locked up in there.
probably
So
can't
in
afford it,
Panama, because of the tropical climate,
He did.
our rum interacts with that wood pretty rapidly. And so we can pick up a lot of those notes quickly. And then 11 months, that's a pretty decent amount of time, particularly for finishing. I mean, the Starlight gentleman. Yes, your name again? I'm sorry. Right. Okay. So the single barrel, the finish. Typically, when you finish in bourbon in something, you're going maybe what 6-9 months or not even that much. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Intense. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. It varies. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thank you. Thank you. So, we good?
Yeah. No,
We get a hand signal. Okay.
that gang signal is for me, not you.
So yeah, so this port finish, this is a limited release. This is kind of a special thing. My distributor here in Kentucky is Heritage Distribution, and they had just a few bottles of this left. So, but it's but you notice how that port barrel really plays into this, and it really brings out some of that port essence intermingled with the rum itself. This is also bottled at 100 proof.
All right, so let's do this. Let's go to some of the questions. Ed, we'll start with you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm a neat rum drinker.
All right.
I love it in cold weather. How you doing? To kind of reiterate your question, on number 2, you take 15 barrels and you take the entire content of the 15 barrels to make this mix. You take a quarter of this barrel and a third of this barrel.
Yep. Good question.
Full barrel.
Yeah. So the question is, for the trophy release, as I mentioned, I'm picking out generally less than 15 barrels worth. And so the question is, am I taking the entire barrel of 15 barrels and is blending those together, or am I taking a portion of the barrels? So that's a great question. This particular release, it's a mix of some full barrels and some partial barrels.
All right, Paul, back up in line. Miss Beam, you're up next. Whoa. Whoa.
Yeah, cut in there. Yes. Temperature. So in Panama, the temperature is fairly consistent year round. At nighttime, it may dip down to a chilly 77. In the daytime,
Heavy humidity.
In the daytime, it's usually high 80s, maybe low 90s, but the biggest difference is whether it's a rainy season or not. So they're just finishing their rainy season. I was down there 2 weeks ago, and it was raining cats and dogs. I mean, not all 100, not 24 hours, but usually good 6 hours of the day. I mean, it was just downpouring. So that's usually the biggest switch. And then they're entering their dry season. But temperature-wise, it's a fairly consistent. Humidity-wise, it's fairly consistent. This product is distilled at Las Cabras, which is in the Herrera province, which is on the Pacific side.
Is it fair to say it's all jungle, pretty much?
Well, I mean, in Herrera, not so much. It is actually, they have in Panama, they have dry jungles and wet jungles. Believe it or not, there is a thing called dry jungles. That side is more dry. But in the Herrera province, though, it is very, there's a lot of agriculture there, and a lot of cane being grown. So, as you can imagine, a lot of the land has been cleared for that. So it's and that's where the aging takes place too. So for aging, it's consistent as well. The warehouses, we didn't talk about the warehouses in Panama, but the warehouses are typically a combination of stone and metal. You know, there's a lot of stone walls and then a metal roof and then sometimes on the sides as well. That's it. They're not temperature controlled. And we don't have bricks. We have pallets. So everything is stacked upright. And so it is, if you walk into an aging warehouse, you're going to see, depending on how tall it is, maybe between 5 to 7 stacked worth of pallets going all the way up, and they are squeezed together. So you can't walk between them. So, you know, the airflow is obviously different from a rick house, but you still get conditions of the higher up versus the lower, whether you're in the middle versus on the outside. So you do get differences that will affect also the aging.
You have to rotate?
There is no rotation.
No, they're standing up and they're.
No rotation. I mean, the only rotation going on typically is they have to move pallets around to get to something.
All right, so
They
let's do
jostle
this.
around.
We had a question online from Scott Rodnauer. It's essentially, we talked about at the beginning, he joined a little bit late, but he was comparing a mash bill with a bourbon. What is a mash bill, if you will? Is it pure sugar cane or can anything be added to it?
Yeah,
Is the question.
so good question. So for rum, it has to be all sugarcane based.
100% based.
Yeah, so it's either going to be typically 100% molasses, like our rum, or cane juice, the juice from the cane. Which, how many of you have actually had juice from the cane? Drank it? Okay. If you, yeah, okay, interesting. So if you ever have the opportunity to drink juice from the cane, do it. It's really interesting because it's not what you're going to expect.
You're talking about straight sugar cane,
Yeah.
just the juice out of the
Yeah,
cane.
just taking, if you cut a stalk of cane and you crush it, squeeze that juice out and drink it. And it is, I mean, most people like me thought it's going to be super sweet, but it's not. In fact, it's, you know, it's very grassy, as you would think, because I mean, it's really just a grass.
But it's all sugar.
It's not, no, it's not sugar like sweet. I mean, to make sugar, you got to cook it down, and that's a byproduct of it. So it's not, you would think it's going to be super sweet, but it's not. It's really interesting. So in Panama, when I'm there, I mean, you can be driving on the road, and there'll be just carts out there, and they're just doing that, creating, and they're putting it in water bottles for you to take if you want. Usually $1 water or bottle. So fun. Okay, what other questions did we have? Oh yeah, so this one had 1,650 bottles.
What about the trophy?
That was it.
Oh,
Okay. The port cask.
the first.
This one with this.
Second one we drank, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the trophy. Yeah,
1,000.
650. Yeah. Number 3. It's somewhere. Yes.
So let me ask the question differently.
I think actually on my website, if you go, you can.
How many
probably find
states are you distributed in? 12?
it. I'm in 10.
You're in 10 states,
Yeah.
Grand Rum in America, and on your website. What is your URL?
It is granderrum.com.
And they can order and have it shipped from there.
Yep.
All right, sit down. I got something to tell everybody. Go.
All right.
Go. All right. Good job, Dan. So
Yeah.
let's talk about number 4, the one that excites me the most. So I asked Dan, who is a rum maker for 12 years now. He's been doing this for a long time. If he would give you a full menu of rum that have nothing to do with bourbon, and you got that in the first 3. You got a port, you got a blend, and you got one that Chris mentioned, and I would agree it would be great for mixing an old fashioned or something else, right? You may like them, you may not like them. This last one I fell in love with, and this is finished in a bourbon barrel. Now remember, and this is what this bottle I picked, but he brought a bottle over that was 11 years old. You could find it at Cox's, you could find it at different liquor stores in Louisville, so it's distributed here. But remember, rum is aged in an old bourbon barrel that could have been used multiple times. So it's not getting a lot out of that bourbon barrel. It's just aging in it. But then Dan exports from Kentucky really high end as he can get, one-time use bourbon barrels. For example, the pick that I did, it was a blind pick. And I think the 6 barrels that I chose from, one was finished for a year to 2 years, roughly, in a Old Fitzgerald. So it's the same rum. It's 8 or 9 years old, single barrel rum, poured into a second barrel. One was Antique 107. One was Old Fitz. Did we have a special reserve? We had an Eagle Rare. We had the Weller 107, maybe a Weller Special Reserve. We had an Old Forester 110 or 1910, and a couple of others, big bourbon brands that we all love, right? One time used. They dumped it, and he bought them for a lot of money, exported them, and then he finished them in his bourbon barrels. And that's what I did. Is I went down to Panama met Dan. And has anybody here been to Panama? Have you been? Did you go to O Town? Is it incredible? Excuse me, I had a different experience than you did. You didn't go with Dan, who knows everybody there.
Wait. When did she go? When did you go? Okay, it's changed a lot.
So Old Town is what, 300 years old probably?
Yeah.
And it's a Spanish province?
Yes, it was part of. So funny enough, the original town of Panama actually was burnt down by Captain Morgan, the rum guy. Yeah, but he actually burnt down the original town, and so they rebuilt the old town, but it is 7 years ago. There were a lot of buildings still pretty vacant and just in bad shape. And there has been a significant amount of investment come in to renovate and keep it in the tradition of what it should be. So it is completely different. I mean, it is completely different.
So I would say it this way
yeah.
So when we went to Old Town, I'd say every 3 or 4 buildings had been rehabbed in the last 5 years, and one was still vacant. But the Hilton, the Marriott, they're as nice as any hotel properties I've seen anywhere in the world. Like, you couldn't afford to stay there. They were so nice. But Old Town, and on the other side of the water in Panama, the skyline looks like New York City. It's that big. The buildings are that tall. I had no idea. It is in
the city itself? I mean, they might be. I mean, there is a little bit of money laundering going on there.
But you saw those big buildings. They're everywhere. Okay. So anyway, thanks for playing. So we go down and we do a barrel pick. And he grabs samples of these 6 or 7 barrels that were aged in different types of bourbon barrels. And that's all I knew is the bourbon that it was finished in, I think, if I remember right. Yeah. And then I picked one, which happened to be, I think the final 2, it was the Old Fitz, I really, really loved. And the one I kept going back and forth to, I love more, is the one I got, which was the Old Forester 1910. And that's what this is. And so this is a barrel pick bottle, a barrel pick that I just got in about 3 weeks ago. It's for sale in the back. By the way, the other barrel pick bottles we have are for sale. Support me, please. I've got Christmas coming up, and I've got 800 bottles in my garage. So support me, but this is incredible. This is, what, Chris? This is number 4. This is the one finished in the Old Forester 1910. And Chris, when he came to my house, he brought a aged bourbon finish, and we're sipping it like bourbon. I'm like, I get it completely. It's amazing when you sip it like a bourbon. Now that it's been aged. So tell them more about it.
So
Thank you.
First of all, when we bottle the single barrel products, we're bottling unfiltered. And so depending on the bottle during the bottling process, you may end up with a bit of sediment, which on this one, Do you see that, Steve?
Can you see it in there? I hadn't noticed. Oh, I can now. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you end up with one of those bottles, I mean, we bottle these unfiltered, and they're straight from the barrel. So my idea is to, hopefully give you the taste as if you were down in Panama with Steve. Now, I will admit, how many barrels did we taste, Steve?
A lot, probably 6 or 7.
Yeah.
I would say.
I've never seen someone drink so much rum out of a barrel like Steve.
Well, come on, big dog. Come on. They were little. It was like Richie Cunningham and Happy Days. They were just like tiny sips. 72 of them.
So as Steve mentioned, I'll buy the barrels. I mentioned it earlier up here, ship them down. So anything that I finish, it's going to be a first fill for myself product. And then I may reuse that barrel, but I'm not going to be selling it as a first fill, or nor will I say it's a finished product. Because at that point, it's not. We're just aging in it. So, but I think again, this is actually finished just over a year. Actually 14 months. And the Oak Forester 1910 barrel.
And so, Dan, remind me, I've asked you before, I don't remember. This is a 9-year rum. Was that 9 years before the finish, or does that include the finish time?
That includes, so the 9 years includes the finish time.
Okay, so it's probably an 8-year, 7.5 plus.
It was an 8-year-old rum, finished 14 months.
So what do you all think of the big pick?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, and again, I'm only replicating my experience. I hated rum. I thought I did because of Captain Morgan and Coke in college, and I never had it since. I never even, had I not met you, I would have never considered drinking. I had no expiration, no interest. And the first time you gave it to me, I'm like, this is really high quality and it's very tasty. And it's not terribly different than bourbon. It's different, but it's really good. It's not sweet like I thought. How many of you have never had a rum before tonight? How many of you have never had a really good sipping rum before tonight? Okay, now that you've had a really, really good, you've had 4 of them, but consider the last one. What do you think of sipping on this rum? Could you do it? Could you sit on your deck and sip on it and enjoy it? There you go. So Dan, this is a fucking marketing problem. I mean, you're making great shit. We got to get the word out. Everybody loves it.
Yeah, we do.
It is so good.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
So let me tell you, go ahead, Paul. 110?
Good question. Yeah, the proof of the barrel pick is 110.2.
And that's cask, right?
Yeah,
It's cask strength.
Yep.
And it doesn't taste 110, does it? So let me tell you something that Dan didn't tell you. So Grander rum, if I've told you the answer, don't say it, let everybody else play. What is Grander? What is a Grander? What does Grander mean? Bill, you can't play. Does anybody know? Bill, sit down. So Grander means what? What's it a nickname for?
Yes.
What?
Wonderful.
A grand. What's a grand? 1,000. So if you look at the bottle, which you don't have it in front of you, a grander is a swordfish.
Nope.
Sailfish.
Nope. Keep going. Yes.
Marlin.
Marlin fish.
I'm glad he remembered what I told him.
Yep.
It's a marlin that weighs 1,000 pounds. And it's an actual term for a trophy marlin.
Yep. Yeah.
It's
for big game fishermen, it's the ultimate cat. It's very rare, as you can imagine. And so a couple have actually been caught in Panama. So the only marlin fish that can grow to be that big are blue marlin and black marlin. And so the only 1,000-pound granders caught in Panama are black marlin. And that's on the Pacific side of the coast.
Oh, goodness gracious. I understand Spanish. Perro grande. So if you can answer this question, I'm going to give you a bottle of Grander rum, my barrel pick bottle. Pay attention. Pay attention. And if I'm wrong on the answer, just play with me because I'm real close to the right answer, and I think I'm dead right. But who has the world record marlin in terms of the size, the weight? If you weren't my landlord and the host, I'd kick you out. No. It's actually a really good guess. You don't fucking own this place. Sit down. Excuse me. All right. Who owns the world record for the largest marlin ever caught? Huh? No. So let me give you a hint. It's a globally known sports figure, and the picture that I saw that you'll find is black and white. It's probably from the late 50s, early 60s. No, that's the same as Ernest Hemingway. His got eaten on the way back into the shore, if I remember right. Jack Nicklaus.
He said it.
Who did? Chip? Well, you're working. You're not. Yeah. All right. Chip gets a bottle. All right. So Google Jack Nicklaus marlin and look at the picture. It'll blow your mind. But a grander is a marlin bigger than 1,000 pounds. A trophy marlin. How'd I do?
Great. You did wonderful.
What's that?
All right. So I have a story to share about Steve in Panama.
Oh boy.
Who wants to hear it? So.
All right, the second biggest. It was 1,700. Look up Jack Nicklaus. 1,700.
So.
Hold on. Was this before 8 p.m. or after 8 p.m.?
It was definitely well after 8 p.m.
Well, we're not talking about it then.
It's innocent. Well, you be the judge. So anyhow, how y'all know Steve likes cigars? Okay. Steve likes to smoke a cigar. And so he told me, he goes, Dan, I'm going to bring some cigars down. And I said, well, Steve, I said, Panama has very strict smoking laws. And so it's very rare to see someone even smoke.
Would you believe that?
Cigarettes
I was shocked.
or anything down there. And Steve's like, well, I'm bringing my cigars. I'm like, okay. I said, well, maybe your hotel allows it. Maybe they have an area. Anyhow, so we come back to this hotel one evening. And
by the way, it's a Marriott in downtown.
Yeah,
so.
this is after he tried to buy some Blantons at the bar, which didn't go well. But that's for another story for him. Yeah. But we go outside and he goes, hey, we can smoke out here. So we sit out there and he looks at me and he goes, so do you have a lighter? I'm like, well, no, I didn't bring cigars. I don't have a lighter. Well, you're the guy who brought cigars. I didn't bring one. He goes, just give me a second. So he disappears. And this, I don't know, is it midnight now?
It's late.
It's late. And I mean, there's no one around. And so he's gone 15 minutes and he walks back in and there's a guy following him who is, I mean, he looked like he'd been sleeping on the curb. I don't know. He's walking in, eyes closed. And Steve says, hey, I found someone with matches. I'm like, who is this guy? He goes, well, he doesn't speak English. I'm like, does he speak Spanish? No. I'm like, well, what does he speak? Russian. I'm like, Russian? He goes, yeah, he's just waiting to be picked up on his freighter ship. And he was sleeping on the couch in the lobby because he was even picked up in the next hour. But I woke him up to see if he had matches. And he did. And so he comes out and he can't speak a lick of English. Of course, we can't speak Russian. But somehow, Steve, unimaginable, is able to coerce the guy to give us matches. And I mean, they were the most odd. Remember those matches that?
I do.
Anyhow, but Steve, leave it to Steve to find some Russian guy who just got off a plane, I think 1 hour before, was trying to catch his nap before he had to go to work and give us a light for a cigar.
So this is the Panama Canal where these freight workers come in, and he's bald and he's probably 40 years old and he looked like he was 80. And before you know it, an hour later, he's shown his family pictures, his beautiful children. We're talking about the Ukraine war. And he was a great guy. Was he not?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and you would have never.
This is through Google Translate, mind you. So we think we had a conversation.
The guy sat with us for an hour and we shared cigarettes and he was awesome. He was.
Yeah, no, he was a really genuine, nice guy. And, but that was pretty funny. But before that, we were at the bar And Steve's like, you know, I really need a bourbon. And he eyes a bottle of blends, which is unheard of in Panama. And so he calls the lady over and says, how much for that, you know? And she's like, I don't know, what, $8?
$10 or something stupid.
And he's like, well, heck yeah.
I'll take five
I'll
of
take
them.
a double. Let's line it up. And she opens up the cork and Steve's like, hold on, I want to nose that. I don't know, what kind of nosing did you get out of that, Steve?
Candle wax.
It wasn't Blanton's. They filled it up to look like Blanton's, but we don't know what
They
it
had
was.
5 Blanton bottles on top
Yeah.
that were decorative. And they were selling Jack Daniels at the bar, which everybody sold Jack Daniels, but no one had a bourbon. And we got all excited we were going to get bourbon.
But we didn't.
We didn't get bourbon. So anyway, listen, Dan's become a good friend through these charades going through Panama, but he's created on his own. He's been a great entrepreneur. He's been a great explorer to create a brand, to raise a family on this brand. It's growing. It's getting bigger. It is fantastic. It's high quality. And you've done a wonderful job with it.
Thank
And
you,
we
Steve.
want to help you at the Big Bourbon Club.
Appreciate it.
We want to help you get the word out to bourbon lovers that rum can be loved too, because I had no idea. So raise your hand if you would ever consider, if you've never bought a rum, something like this. I mean, it's that good. It's that good. All right, go close them.
Awesome.
Dan,
Well,
thank you so much.
thank
And
you,
we
sir.
may do a trip back next year. If anybody wants to go, let me know. Yeah, November 15th. Ed, I'm sorry, last question. Yellowstone, right? Well, we don't know. We've got a week targeted in March to go back, and I may haul a few of you all with me. I may not go. We'll have to see as we get closer, but we'll do one at some point for sure. But Dan, I'm glad you came into my life. This has been great. You've become
Thank
a
you,
good
Steve.
friend, and Merry Christmas, everybody. Have great holidays. Have great cheer, and thanks for being part of the Big Bourbon
Yeah.
Club.
Thank you for coming out. I enjoyed it. Thank you.